Ray says he's been trying to, Ray, haven't you been working with the owners of Horrocks?
Say that again?
You've been talking to the owners of Horrocks, telling them to locate right here on Webster Road?
Because Meridian turned them down.
Is that where, I thought you were trying to
I was
tell
trying to
them?
get him in right here.
Yeah.
Well, keep working, because Meridian turned them down.
Oh, I know that, where it has a mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, Elliot, 2 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean,
It's hard to breathe in these.
Well, the glasses get off.
yeah, that would have been a great spot. But the on and off, they'd have had to really rework that
You
intersection.
know, I got them together. I was an executive recruiter for 25 years, so I'm not used to doing that. And I got them together, and Kim Horak showed him up, stood him up. Never showed up at the meeting. And Kim said, I'm sorry, you know, I had something to do.
But sorry doesn't work with Dale.
Well, and so I did it again, and he stood him up again.
Oh, no.
Dale said, no way, forget it. We were screwed on that one.
We need to grab a slot for that to happen here.
Sorry to interrupt.
Really taking this one all seriously.
I know. I sure am not.
Good to go?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. We will call the meeting to order at 6:02. Happy to see you all here. As some of you may have heard, we've had some board members and some staff that are sick, so mask wearing is optional if you'd like to. There's some masks over there and some sanitizer. The office has been sanitized, so I think everyone's safe, but please take the precautions you need, because I'm gonna do so much speaking tonight, I'm not gonna mask up. But I did test, negative today.
Have you been sanitized?
I have been sanitized, yes. This is our January 2nd meeting. We're holding it on a Tuesday due to the holiday. I understand we should be streaming live today. If we're not, apologies to the folks at home. We'll get that back up and running as soon as possible. Why don't we start with a roll call?
Mr. Funes Bliss?
Here.
Ms. Butler Challenger here. Ms. Hagerman? Here. Mr. Phillips?
Here?
Mr. Rosecrans?
Here.
Ms. Wilson and Ms. Kellerson are absent this evening.
Thank you. Let's do a bit of civic reflection. We're going to stand, if you are able, to say the Pledge of Allegiance and then follow up by a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now a moment of silence. Thank you. Next on our list is approval of the agenda. We have a pretty light agenda after the holiday break, which is helpful when we're down a couple of people. Folks aren't going to miss much. Is there anything folks want to add or take away from the agenda, switch around, or we'd entertain a motion to approve?
I move we approve the agenda as printed.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Any disclosures of conflicts of interest this evening? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to public statement 1. This is the first of 2 times tonight we'll offer opportunity to speak publicly at the meeting. The first is asked to be pertaining to the agenda tonight. If you have something not pertaining to the agenda, there's a second time at the end of the meeting where you can say anything about anything for 3 minutes. So if you have something on the agenda you want to speak to, you also have 3 minutes. Take a stand at the lectern.
I just want to make sure we're done.
Hello.
Nope.
Ray Kotke, Park Lake Road. Under the loose title of Planning Commission Priorities, I've been thinking about this over the holidays. And I was gonna call you Miles, but I didn't want to interrupt you, so I've just thought maybe the planning commission, we should, and I wanted to bring this up tonight so that you guys could hear it too. Just an idea I had, you know, the state and pretty much a lot of people are trying to go the EV route, you know, by 2030, electric vehicles. And there's still a very big need for charging stations. So I thought, you know, we have parking lot restrictions, we have lighting restrictions, we have, you know, recommendations. And, you know, how many parking spots we have to have per resident or whatever. Why not have charging stations required when you get over X amount of parking spaces in a commercial property? Because I'm sure all of us agree that, you know, we see at least 2, couple, 3, maybe 5 electric vehicles in a parking lot at any given time. And it's pretty inconvenient when you're at the point where you don't know if you have enough charge left to get home. So I think that would be a very good, you know, I won't say convenience, but it would be a convenience. But I just think that, you know, that's a utility that I think is gonna have to become more ubiquitous if we're ever going to be on the upper side of this. And so now I think is the time that we should start planning about that. Maybe we could be a little more forward-thinking community and get that into one of our ordinances. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Any other public comment tonight? All right, items from county, state, federal, and/or other agencies. We don't have anybody in the audience that I can see, so I think we're good there. There's also no consent agenda, number 7, so we will move through that. We do have minutes from the Board of Trustees regular meeting of December 18th. How do people feel about the minutes?
No concerns?
All right, someone want to make a motion to accept them as presented?
I shall move.
Okay, motion by Al,
I'll support that.
support by Kate, thank you. Any other discussion? We'll do a voice vote again. All those in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, our minutes are approved. There's also no vouchers tonight, having been closed for a while. No treasurer's report, no committee appointments, no township committee reports. That leads us to unfinished business, items for introduction and discussion. That's 13 large A, small a, Planning Commission 2024 priorities under my name. So if you recall, in my former role as Planning Commission member, I brought to you a memo that Miles and I authored about topics that the Planning Commission was interested in taking up, but didn't want to get too far ahead of us and looking for some guidance from us. So hopefully this has been introduced, I think, 2-3 weeks ago, and you've had some time to think about it. So the items are, do we want to talk about a grading and runoff proposed ordinance? Do we want to talk about an ordinance for crosswalks to ensure vehicles stop for pedestrians? Do we want to talk about ordinances for wind, solar, and battery renewable energy? And then sort of an overall, overarching statement of what kind of development are we hoping for our community, and where in the community do we, want to see that development? So I thought I would just open it up and start at number 1, how we're feeling about a grading and runoff proposed ordinance. This struck me as I was thinking about this over the weekend. Sherry has been talking about PFAS with our NORM facility a lot, and we've received a lot of public comment. And then I've received some emails from community members wanting to talk about PFAS and runoff specific to the NORM facility. It's actually not an issue with the NORM facility because they're going to be on the sewer system, but it does show that there seems to be some concern in our community with possibilities of runoff and where that goes and what it pertains to. So that struck me as something that maybe we would want to talk about, because we've actively heard from folks that there's concerns about that. How are you all feeling about that?
I think it makes sense if it ties together. I had a question about, in the first sentence there, it says in response to the unique challenges faced by our rural township. And I was just wondering maybe if you could elaborate on what makes it unique or a challenge, or both.
Yeah, I could talk about that. So Bath is kind of unique, because of our soil structure in the township. It's a particularly wet township, even more wet than some of our neighboring municipalities. So in that sense, runoff is a larger concern here than it would otherwise be. I mean, if you have a municipality with a large amount of sand in the soil structure, it's not nearly as much of a concern, so.
Thanks, Miles. Jack?
Miles, just a follow-up question. Wasn't there a little bit of concern about runoff and how to control some of that in the proposed private drives, I guess, private streets?
Yeah, yes, that's correct, and in the context of private roads, private drives, that can be addressed, but really the blind spot we have right now is when it comes to some of these larger rural properties that might be even of like a residential land use. Things that, you know, have to go through the planning commission, be it a commercial development or a private road. We have tools in our toolbox there to address those. It's really the large single-family home remodel or the large pole barn structure, and they bring in a lot, you know, some of these pole barns can be 80 feet by 100 feet, and they're bringing in soil to the site to flatten out the site. It can be a lot of soil sometimes, maybe right on a property line, 10 feet from their neighbor.
Okay, so, yeah, impacting it, yeah, okay, I get it now. So I'm assuming with that, nobody's gonna touch the sacred cow of agriculture in any way?
No, I don't think so. I think that, and again, I think the purpose of this is to see if there's even an interest in exploring this. We don't even wanna start writing some language or doing research if there's no interest at all. But I don't know exactly how the language would shake out, but I would imagine that, like most regulations, agriculture would be protected.
We're limited in what we could do with them anyway, right?
Yes, yeah.
Other thoughts? Go ahead,
Are other
Brandon.
municipalities in the area, do they have an ordinance on something like this?
Yeah, some municipalities address this through just a grading ordinance, some through a drainage ordinance, some, empower their county to have a more robust set of drainage standards at the county level, so it's tackled in various ways, and, some municipalities don't address it at all. So it's really all over the map on this one.
Okay.
Go ahead, Kate.
I was just wondering what influence the drain commissioner currently has. Don't you have to already get some permissions if you had a large rural property and you wanted to dig a drainage ditch or whatever, or put a culvert in your driveway or anything like that? I feel like there already are some.
They have some tools in their toolbox, and so does the road commission. The road commission's, authority really stops to let the road right away, and the drain commission's authority really stops at the county drains themselves. So again, if you're not a large rural property that, where this is happening is on a neighboring property line, not on the road right away or not near a county drain, it's just really one of those gray areas that's kind of unregulated.
So this could be a situation where, let's say back of my property is wetlands and I wanna drain it, so I dig a drain.
Yep.
And now it's flooding into my neighbor's property.
Yep.
They would see that as a problem.
Yep.
This ordinance would essentially prevent that from happening in that way.
It would be something we'd explore. We'd
Okay.
explore scenarios like that to see what we could or couldn't do, what we would find reasonable or not, and do research on what other municipalities do in these situations. But again, we wouldn't wanna spend all the staff time and all the planning commission's time, and then just to come here and say, this isn't something we wanna look at.
Miles, I know at the planning commission, we've talked a lot about sort of clear cutting plots of land, what that can cause if no building or nothing happens after that. Would this address any of those concerns?
I think that if we were to go towards the grading side of things, I think it would.
Okay.
And we typically, when we were doing some light research in this, to see if it's even an option or something that we even have the authority to regulate, you'd often see grading, ordinances paired with clear cutting ordinances.
Okay.
They usually exist in the same chapter.
That's helpful. Other thoughts? I should mention John, our chair of the planning commission, is also here if we have questions for him. I don't think we need formal votes on this, but it seems to be there's some interest in this. Should I read that as this is a go-ahead, that our planning department and commission should spend some time on that, or do folks have concerns about that? Again, what we're trying to prevent here without sort of doing too much pre-work is having the planning commission and Miles and his team spend a bunch of time in bringing something to us that we say, we have no interest in this. So it's not to say that what Miles has said tonight will be in the ordinance or won't be in the ordinance, but to give them an idea, you know, is there room on our plate to, an interest to take these things on?
Chairman, if I could ask John a question? if it'd be
Yeah.
all right. John, so what, I'll wait until you come up to the microphone. Do you have a sense of how either important or valuable that this would be for your planning commissioners? Did you get some sense in having conversation with the planning commissioners themselves?
Right now, we have no tools in our toolbox to control any type of grading or water diversion from residential properties that are being developed. We obviously can with commercial properties, but nothing residential. So you could have a lowland on your property and you could fill it in and push the water to your neighbor's property and there's no recourse. The state controls areas of over 2 acres of standing water. The Drain Commission, like Miles said, has tools in their toolbox for anything that's imposed on a county drain and the county drain right away. That's the only restrictions they have as well. So this would give us a tool in our toolbox for the residential property that develops and fills in and does things to divert water onto their neighbor's property. Did
Okay.
I answer your question, Mr. Phillips?
Yes, thank you.
I'll say one of the things that I've heard as a planning commissioner these last 3 years is when we have a project and do a public hearing, rarely do a lot of people show up, but when we have had people show up that are neighbors, this seems to be one of the things that they always point to. Whether it's true of the project or not, just the concern seems to be out there. Which again, tells me if folks are concerned about this, it's probably helpful for us to be able to say to them, we've got some protections in place. Other thoughts on grading and runoff? Do we feel like this is something we'd recommend the planning commission to take on?
You're looking for just a consensus?
Yeah, I don't, unless you all feel like we need to be formal and vote on these things, I think.
I don't think so.
Because
Yeah,
theoretically, the planning commission could also say, we've looked into this and decided to do nothing.
Right. So I would agree with Kate and also some of your, the things you've outlined here that, you know, I guess I wouldn't make too deep of a dive on it right away. But I think it's certainly something that you could start exploring to see how it aligns with maybe some other municipalities around us and what are the pros and the cons about it. That's just my personal feeling.
Anybody feel strongly that this isn't something we should look into or spend time on? All right, does that help, John? Miles?
Yeah, very helpful.
All right, the second issue is ordinance for crosswalks to ensure vehicles stop for pedestrians, especially with our upcoming Safe Routes to Schools work. This seems to be a pressing issue. As I was thinking last night about how I felt about these things, this one was, sort of seemed like an obvious one. Like, what would I say to people if I had said, no, I don't think we should worry about pedestrians and school children crossing the road. So to me, this seems like a bunt for us, but obviously, if you all feel differently, certainly open to that conversation. Miles, do you have any context to add for this one?
Yeah, this would just probably take the form of a regulatory ordinance, so it wouldn't necessarily be a zoning ordinance, but as the planning department and commission in the past, is just because we're the body that typically brings ordinances forth, we're well suited to look at this one, so that would be the only thing that would maybe make this one stand out.
How are folks feeling about this one?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. It aligns with the safe routes to school, they definitely have some feelings about crosswalks and the importance of them and that they need some attention. And I believe in the non-motorized path survey or the Park Lake survey or somewhere, I know that I had seen safety concerns and crosswalks were like top of the list there as well. So I think it's something that people are definitely interested in having addressed in the community.
Miles, if I could ask, other than some of the reference I think Kate just made that you read was also around the Park Lake area, but are there other distinct areas of concern you've heard about?
Yeah,
I mean, schools, obviously.
yep, that was the only other one I was gonna mention was the schools.
Okay,
Yep, but those are probably the high priority areas, and
Those two.
to again reiterate, that survey pointed that out, the non-motorized survey.
right, okay.
Other thoughts? Al?
I worked on Michigan State's campus for 25 years. They have these walks where you walk up to the area and walk across. Cars aren't stopping for them. These young kids have got to be trained to still look before they cross them walks. Because if they don't, they're gonna get hit, and that's what happens on campus all the time.
Yeah, when I read this, that's exactly what I thought of was campus.
Yeah.
Cause I always forget, you're supposed to stop at those when people are waiting and it's dark and I can't see. So one of the thoughts that I had was some signage to remind cars that this is an ordinance, if that's what comes about, that would help. But you're right, that the students should still be looking both
Well,
ways and
and
stopping.
them are older kids. These are little high school kids and little kids walking to go into the beach. And all they're thinking about is the water. And all of a sudden, they're walking across and not looking, and they walk right in front of a car. It's just too bad that our drivers can't be a little more cautious, but they aren't.
I will include that some of the Safe Routes to School grant money does include money for education and programming run
yeah.
through the schools or in coordination with the schools to teach kids how to safely use crosswalk as well. So it won't completely solve the problem, but hopefully a step in the right direction.
Maybe there's signage we could do on that side too.
Yeah.
For both, trying to
Yes.
educate both
I believe that
walkers
that
and
is
drivers.
something that Miles might know more, but I believe that that is something that they have been working on and trying to do, I believe with the county, the road commission, I think.
Yeah.
It sounds like we've got some support for this as well. Does anyone feel strongly this isn't something we should think about or talk about?
No, I'm just waiting for somebody to say they don't feel pedestrian safety is important. Go right ahead.
Yeah,
Go right ahead, Lee.
yeah, it is an election year. Do you want to go on record as saying that?
No, I absolutely do not.
No, I do like that this is, it sort of is working in tandem with other things that are happening. It feels like we've got our act together when we're doing what we need to be doing and other folks are doing what they need to be doing to come up with good policy and good activity. All right, I think that sends a message. John, you feel good about that, and Miles? All right, the next issue was ordinance for wind, solar, and battery renewable energy. I know there's some things happening at the county and state level that are making this perhaps more of a need for us. Miles, do you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
If you don't mind, I think John can.
Oh, no,
Because
of
he's
course.
the one that brought this one forward.
The game changer here was when they turned it over to the Michigan Public Service Commission and gave local municipalities 90 days to either approve or deny any permits for alternative energy, if I can use that word loosely. So I feel that we would have to have a plan in place that was kind of boilerplate in order to be able to meet the 90-day deadline. Otherwise, it automatically goes to the Michigan Public Service Commission. Now, the only disclaimer here is that it can't be more restrictive than what the state requirements are, but it gives us a few things that we can do as far as setbacks and those type of things that otherwise we wouldn't have any control over at all. But, yeah, obviously, we've gotta have language in place, or we can't meet the deadline. Does that answer the question?
And if I could just add one thing too, we don't have too much, in the way of solar regulation in the township right now, but we do have a bit of language in regards to wind energy. So we probably also wanna get into that ordinance and make sure that we're in compliance and not overreaching for what the standards the state has set.
Right.
Yeah, that's helpful context, especially for Jack and Kate who weren't on the board. We did have a ordinance proposed to us for wind, and the board decided not to take action on that, allowing actually less restrictions by not having the ordinance. Go ahead.
I really, John, you and I have had conversations both, at the board level a little bit and also just privately. I'm really not confident that it's gonna change any of the direction the state's going in. I'm just really not, and I don't know if that's going to, I'm not sure remaining silent is the way to go either, but I just don't know at what level to step into this stream, I really don't, because I don't feel confident that any township's gonna do, right, anything that's going to, make the state's gonna go, okay, you're doing a fine job, we'll let you control your own. I just don't see that. Am I wrong about that, or?
They're taking a bite at the apple at a time. You remember the last 5 years, we fought gravel and aggregate mining ordinance going to the state level. So I think this is just another piece that they wanna move control up to the state level instead of the local level. And you're right to an extent, Jack, but I think if we don't take any stand on this at all, then we have no input whatsoever. At least during that 90-day window, we would have a chance to negotiate some local things that may benefit us that the state won't consider at all. But I don't know. Until this plays out for a while, I don't know how it's gonna go, to be honest with you.
Okay, so I think my response is similar to, grading and Ron's proposed ordinance, is that you definitely do take a look, because I think it's important to have a voice in these things, otherwise forever hold your peace, so to speak, but, I wouldn't dive too deeply into this. I'd just see how it relates to the portions of the ordinance we already have, but I'm not a planning commissioner, I'm not trying to tell anybody how to do their job, that's just my personal feeling.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but I also think that we don't have any input at all. There's only 3 people on the Michigan Public Service Commission.
Yes.
Last decision was a 2-0, so over the tunnel under the straits, so it's gonna be interesting to see how that works for the state.
My read was that the new laws that were passed were actually passed to be more permissive of this, since local governments were sort of doing their own to fight against solar farms and wind farms, and that the Democrats, once they took power, wanted to do things that could encourage those bits of alternative energy. Is that a fair read of that, Miles?
Yeah, the industry that itself, the solar and wind industry, was probably growing frustrated by, at every turn, getting their projects being foiled by public pushback and local ordinances, and it was probably becoming a pretty confusing regulatory landscape for them as well, because different regulations from township to, or municipality to municipality. And so, in order to streamline and then encourage these developments, as you said, I think the state has removed local control. But to John's point, they have left in some factors for local control, and I think John is saying we need to create a boilerplate set of conditions we'd like to see with these, because we only have 90 days to evaluate, which is not a lot of time. To Jack's point here though, this is new, this is all new regulation for me as well. Myself and our assessor are actually going to training in January to start schooling ourselves up on these new state regulations and what they have control and what they don't, so anything we do in this space would probably follow that training for me, just because I need to educate myself here a little bit.
Cause we could take the opposite tact of, obviously we can't be more restrictive than the state, but we could find ways to be more permissive, right?
Yeah, you
Like
could,
if we wanted to be a hub of solar energy, or, you know, if we thought that was one of the futures of Bath Township, with all these other communities saying no, we could be a place that welcome them and say yes. I'm not saying that's what you would do at the planning commission, but that is on the table as well.
it's possible. The real thing, I guess the real landscape of this in Bath is, as far as solar is concerned, there's only a couple parcels in Bath that kind of fit this utility size solar that the state is looking for out of these regulations and the removal of local control. I don't know how desirable our community would be compared to some of the other sites in Clayton County. So I think the chances are for solar are low. For wind, now that can really go anywhere and can work in tandem with farms, so it might be a little bit more likely there. I don't know, it's a hard call on how likely I think this could be a issue for Bath to take up. I see this happening more in the middle and upper regions of the county though, just cause land is more expansive and cheaper up there.
Yeah, on the planning commission, I've noticed this, there's like this protectionism of agriculture. But oftentimes the folks that are driving this are people who want to sell their farmland or want to lease their farmland. So I've noticed in our discussions, it's been a landowners' rights opportunity. So there's this like weird push and pull, like
Yeah.
other people who are not the farmers are trying to fight to save the farmland that the farmer is trying to lease or sell for this purpose. It's sort of just a strange mix of like, they all are coming at this from a good angle and a fair angle.
Yeah, one of my biggest concerns, and me and John have talked about this, was really what this is going to do to what this removal of local control is going to do to some of those farmers, cause right now those farmers are able to extract quite a bit from these companies looking to develop. I mean, you get a couple wind turbines on your property, you gotta get that summer home in Florida, you know? But now that local control has been removed, and these projects are gonna have a better pipeline, I'm not sure if the farmers will make out as good as they once did. We'll have to see how, again, it's new, and I don't know that for sure, but that's been some of the concern. Is that they won't be able to extract as much, because the pipeline to push these projects through is so much easier now.
Lizzie?
I would just add that in our office, Matt Cushel and Kyle O'Mara, along with my partner Ross Bauer, have been really active in this. Our whole water resources group, which has a large representation of the drain commissioners, including our county drain commissioner here, they have been working on projects like this for a very long time, being involved, for instance, in Gratiot County with the slew of them that you see. So our office does have some experience and has also been conducting training, so we'll make sure that we connect well. I know that Miles has a great connection with our team, so we'll make sure that we provide support as well. There are still going to be some spaces where the local unit has more authority, again, focuses on commercial level, utility level, that leaves open the question of what about if I just want to throw up a little windmill in the backyard, and do you want to be involved in that regulatory aspect or not? And then the last thing that I would mention is a similar sort of changeover happened with liquor licenses, maybe now 10 years ago, where it used to be that the decision came first from the local unit, and then you sent your recommendation up to liquor control, whereas when the change occurred, it was, here, you should know that there's an application, tell us if you want to tell us something, and then we'll maybe consider it. But in the years since then, we've really emphasized that that's the opportunity for you to create a record on behalf of your residents. So if your residents have strong feelings, it is an opportunity for you to say, hey, let's have some time in a meeting for our folks to come in and say, this is how we feel about XYZ potential type of project. There you're creating a record that you then send with your recommendation or notes about what you'd like. And I think that's how I would recommend that the township view this. The primary push among many pushes was that the industry itself was complaining because they would submit a project and then it would take so very long to get through an individual community. We work with some communities south of Lansing where there was to be a larger wind farm, and some of the townships were all in and ready to roll and didn't have any regulation hoops to jump through, and they were like, let's do this thing that's great. And there were a handful of them that were like, I don't know how I feel about this yet, and we need to think about it, and then eventually we'll get to putting your project through that process that we created, which If time is money and it is energy, then that is a drawdown. And so I think that's the other reason that you're seeing this clock instituted. I do think 90 days is very short to do all the work that you want to do, which is perhaps why advanced planning might be beneficial to all of you.
That's really helpful, thanks. Other questions or thoughts on this particular topic?
I'll just throw out another thought, and people are gonna say you keep beating this dead horse into the ground, but I just am not comfortable with the fact that 2 out of 3 people can sit at the pleasure of the governor, can make a decision when we all know that she is way behind all this renewable energy, and they sit at her pleasure, and I don't believe for a minute they're gonna make a decision that's gonna be outside the scope of what the governor wants. And I just totally don't feel it's fair, and I don't feel that we can having a voice, I agree with everybody that said it. But I don't see where it's gonna make a hill of beans worth of difference, but I think having a voice is probably gonna be important.
This might be the only way to have our voice then.
Could be, yes.
Folks over here, any thoughts, questions, strong feelings for or against?
No, I think it's practical to have something rather than nothing in this instance. If things change, I mean, we could very well get a new governor in the near future, so I think it would be to
We
our
definitely will.
benefit. Right. I think it would be to our benefit to have something in place to build off of if that were to become an opportunity down the road.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Good point.
Does anybody feel strongly that the planning commission or department should spend no time talking about this? All right, does that feel good, John, Miles?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The last question is a little bit less specific. And I was talking to Brenda on the phone today, unsure of like how we would approach this and what exactly we're looking for. But I think what I understand the planning commission to be asking is, what type of developments are we looking for, and do we have preference for where in the township those would go? We have a master plan that somewhat lays that out. Are there strong feelings about types of industry, types of development, that type of stuff that could guide the planning commission as projects come in, and could guide Miles as people interested in building developments or starting developments? He could have an understanding of where our gut is at. The only thing that I came up with was, and I already know Miles is passionate about both of these things, but affordable housing. We obviously need more affordable housing across the state, but certainly in our community as well. And what I hear from a lot of people my age is there's no sort of mid-price housing, or there's a lack of stock in mid-price housing. You know, you're either looking at something that is, $100,000 or below, or $500,000 and above. And folks who are, my age and elder millennials who haven't saved up any of that money yet, because the world looks different, can't access the $200,000, $300,000 houses. There's just not enough in the township and perhaps the state. So that was the only thing that came to mind when I thought, what do we want to encourage? It is probably more safe, affordable housing and mid-level housing for folks. What did you all come up with as you reflected on this? Okay?
I agree with you and Miles that I think there's definitely a need. I mean, you see houses in Mead Creek, for example, that go for sale and they get snatched up for what to me seems like a crazy sales price, just because the demand is so high for that specific type of house in this specific area. I think we could definitely use more developments similar to that. I think the school district would also agree with that, because that's gonna bring in families, which is students, which is dollars. I think that would help our community in multiple ways.
I have one of those houses if anybody wants to make a cash offer. Other feelings about what developments we care about, or what developments we would like to not see, or where we would like to see certain things?
Can I ask this question? Miles, are you guys just trying to figure out where we would like the township to expand, like businesses in certain areas?
Yeah, I think it is a pretty open-ended question, and really just trying to feel the pulse of what people are thinking. Me and John were talking before the meeting, coming into this next year, we probably will be starting to initially review our current zoning map and our future land use map, because we're going to have to redo the comp plan in 2026, and we want to make that date, so it's a long process, so we're gonna get some of those things rolling this year, and having input about what types of land uses and where can, help us through that process as we are looking at what the zoning districts look like and what makes sense. I think we are gonna be changing up some of the zoning in the township. It sounds like from what the feedback that I've got.
So that's something you're already gonna review.
It's something that we will review, but just to give us some guidance on what that first draft of the map looks like, you know? Like, a good example is right now Vine Street, if you're familiar with where Vine Street is, it's, just west of Main Street. It's a dirt road, it's largely residential, or it's all residential, probably smaller, single-family homes. It has no municipal sewer, it has no municipal water, it's zoned high-density development. So, that would be a street where we'd say, like, we probably aren't gonna see a retail center on that road. And I don't know if this, but maybe this body wants to see a retail center on that road, in which we could work towards that through regulatory incentives. But that's the type of feedback we're looking for, I mean, and what do people wanna see, and what are some ideas particularly for the downtown? I know we've been working with a developer that's recently acquired some property in downtown. He's been asking staff and the public what they'd like to see in those areas, cause they wanna know too, they want that business to thrive. So they wanna know, what are people looking for, where is our vacuum for demand? Do people wanna see a bakery, a coffee shop, do they just wanna see more apartments there, where are they looking for?
Main Street was the other piece that I wrote down. I think I hear equal amounts of people say it's never gonna be what it was, we should abandon that hope, and it could be something different with more residential and less commercial. And then an equal number of people say we need to bring it back to what it was, it should be commercial, we should be doing things down there to do that. You know, and they're all privately owned, right? It's not like we can wave a magic wand either, but it sort of would be helpful, I think, if we, the township, collectively had a agreed upon plan for that area. I know it means making half of the people mad because they believe the other way, but it does keep us in this limbo where it's a mixture down there that, you know, the businesses open and close rather quickly, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, along with the housing that's been discussed, which I feel strongly about also, I'd like to see other opportunities for family recreation, and I'm gonna go maybe off the reservation a little bit here. I guess maybe, I don't know if that's even proper to say that,
I was
but,
thinking outside the box.
yeah, think also, thank you very much, Miles. So as I travel around, one of the things I notice that seems to be a draw in this state right now, and it's just it's a weird one, so hold on for a minute. It's very hard to get ice time. That seems to be a real draw right now for kids and families, and also incorporating an area where families can go to have other things at the rink, where they have, you know, where they can rent rooms for parties and stuff, and it gets families together, it gets them kind of involved in exercise activity and things like that, and I must say, I haven't probably looked at the zoning map as much as I should, but something like that, some other recreation for families, I think is something that I've just noticed is growing in some of these small communities, or other family recreation opportunities, so I'll just add that in there.
That's great, that's helpful.
I love that idea, Jack. As a person with a family, it would be, they've sort of outgrown Wiswasser Park now, which they loved so much for so long. We are sort of limited now at what we can do in the local area at least.
just by way of example, one of the small communities I happen to go to frequently because of some of my wife's kin is up in Kingsley, which is a pretty small area. They got an absolutely beautiful place there that has not only the rink, but rooms for community engagement and different things. And like I say, parties or whatever, I just think there's some real good opportunities for growth in some of their family recreation if we have one parcels. I don't know if it really pays off for the developers that much, but.
Well, we have one business in town that, we have had talks with in the past, which is Court One. And they do actually quite well because, again, there is a vacuum, for demand for spaces like that in this area. So they have been looking into expansion, suggestions like that help, cause when those talks come up, and, yeah, there is interest at the board level to see stuff like this expanded.
That new park in Meridian Township on Towner Road, it's almost in our township,
Yeah.
is really nice.
Yeah.
It is
Agreed.
really nice.
Agreed. Yeah, Meridian's got that operating budget, and they've definitely,
Yeah,
used
they've got the
some of it.
millage for doing those things.
Yeah,
But one of the assets that we do have that the planning commission is going to talk about is land. We do own a significant amount of land around the township that could be used for some of these facilities if we wanted to talk about municipal parks, things that we would own and maybe operate.
sure.
How about folks on this side? Did you have strong feelings about some guidance in this area?
I just think it's important to, whatever the guidance is, that it coordinates and aligns with like the Park and Rec 5-year plan and the Park Lake Advisory and the school museum project and all of those kinds of things that are all sort of happening and planning and working at the same time. Safe Routes to School, for example. I think that should be high priority in whichever direction things go, is keeping those lines of communication open between all the different entities and groups and checking in to make sure that we're supporting each other and not working separately on the same things, because that's just sort of redundant as well. But kind of having that shared vision, I think, is really helpful.
I think that's really important. One of the pieces of feedback I've gotten from our committees is they work really, really hard on these plans, and we then pass them as the plan, and then nothing happens. We don't invest any time or money or effort into it. And if you read these plans, it's like, wow, we could be not a different community, but a better version of ourselves in 5 years if we were to do this. But we actually have to do it. So I think that's really well taken. Brenda, Al, anything to add on this one? John, does that help? Miles, does that help?
Yeah, and I'll just say, as we're going through that process, if there's anything anyone ever thinks of, please reach out to the planning department or John and let us know your thoughts. We're always open for input.
One last question from me, Miles. When Commissioner Washington was here, I think last time or maybe the time before last, he had indicated that the county was looking at an ORV ordinance and decided against it, and that the local jurisdictions would have to come up with their own. Is that something we have? Is that something we need? It's the first time I had heard that the county was thinking about it.
Yeah, that's something I would have to look into. I don't know off the top of my head. Cause it's not something within the zoning, but there could be regulatory ordinances I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, I don't wanna create more regulation where there doesn't need to be any, but it was sort of a red flag when he said, we're gonna leave it up to the locals, and I thought, boy, I've never heard anybody around here talk about how we think or feel about that.
Yeah.
Ryan, if I could
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
comment on that for a minute. I kind of think that's important, and I'll tell you one of the reasons why. From the aspect of the police department, it's kind of always been, I mean, there's state law regarding it, but there's a lot of people in this community, there's a lot of back roads, a lot of dirt roads, a lot of traveling, to and from. We got a lot of DNR land, and it leaves them in a position where they really don't know, because it was always my approach when I was there. As long as you're not acting foolish or doing something that endangers people or yourself, kind of, they're behaving, they're on the side of the road, they're going from a short point A to point B, of course, not driving down to Myers to get their groceries or something, but, you know, doing reasonable things that, you know, just let them be. But it puts them in a peculiar position of trying to figure out, you know, when to enforce, when not to enforce. I'd just like to take a little quick look at it. I think would be important to do that, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
To go down that road next to Meyer, you have to have like a four-wheel.
Having driven a police car down there before for responses, I agree, since I took a gas tank off the bottom of one of them, so.
Yeah, I tried to prove a point by driving that once too, and never again. Anything else that you all came up with that we should pitch John and Miles' way? One of the first things that they will do at their meetings will be to decide on a yearly plan, which I thought was very helpful as a planning commission member. We agree early in the year about what are the things we're gonna talk about and when we're gonna talk about them. And I found that very helpful to see what's coming and do more planning than I think we typically do. We sort of are reactive rather than proactive. So I think they'll take this information and talk to the planning commissioners, and Kate, you'll represent us there now, to mark this out, when this will happen and when their conversations will move forward. All right, well, thank you, Miles, and thanks, John, for asking us to do this. When John brought this to my attention, I thought a couple of things. First was, obviously, this is something we probably should be doing, but what I hear a lot from the public is they are longing to hear us process thoughts together. There's a concern that, you know, we get into a back room and make all the decisions and then come out here and we just do votes, which is not happening, but we also don't process our thoughts and talk to each other. You know, we do more of the business pieces of our agenda, which is what our role is, but I do think it's helpful for the public to hear where we're thinking, and then if the public who's watching this disagrees with any of this, they can come to our next meeting and they can send us emails and then say, you know, we don't want to go that way, or you should have talked about this. So I think that's really helpful for the public to get a view on that processing. And I also think it helps with the disconnect we often have with our committees. You know, we have a lot of advisory committees. The Planning Commission is not advisory in nature, but many of our committees are. And I think the feedback I've heard is they often feel lost. What should we be spending time on? What do you want us to do? We spend time on things and send it to you all, and you're like, what is this? How did we get here? We're not into this. So hopefully bridging that divide a bit and giving some more instruction to the committees that we have seated in order to help guide our work as a board. So hopefully this process was helpful. I'll be talking to you all offline to see if this might be something we could do with other committees, if this was a good use of our time. If you all feel otherwise, certainly share that with me, but I'll take that offline with each of you. All right, I think that closes us down on the Planning Commission discussion, and I'd encourage all the planning commissioners to watch this video to hear these comments in real time. That brings us to items for action. And letter A is the 2024-20 to 2028 5-year Parks and Recreation Plan. Let's do a brief presentation by the committee. I know Chair Montry is here, and then we'll move into a public hearing where folks from the public can voice their interest, concerns, or ideas. Sound okay with folks?
Hello again. So I'm not going to take a lot of time. We went through this last month. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, either from you after having the past month to look through this, or from anyone that might be here that had the past. I know there were some suggestions that came in for changes, which is why we have that time period in between there. So I know that that Taylor was going to make some of those changes before it went into the final submitted version. But other than that, I don't want to take up your time with what you heard last month either. So is there anything pressing in particular? And then also to add on to it, Trustee Phillips can say that, you know, what you're talking about with whether it is a type of facility where it's a hockey rink or barn or a, indoor facility or that, you know, we are, as the, advisory committee, looking at the Upton Road facility as possibility for, not saying it's going to be a hockey rink, not saying it's going to be anything, but that's a really unique space that we have right now that's kind of this like blank canvas, and something that you'll all hear us come to you with in the next few months is potentially a proposal to have some kind of let's dream big consultant work of what can this space be, from some things that were discussed in that plan, that were based on public input, whether that means dog park, which was constantly came up, whether that means, you know, multiple softball, baseball facility, whether that means hockey rink, whether that means a multiple variety of those things. But that's probably something that we will be coming to you to ask about, some funding or some guidance to be able to think about that in the next year, that would then influence, you know, the DNR trust fund proposals that we may be putting in the future.
Was there anything in particular in here that the committee was more jazzed about than anything else?
I think just the response, and, you know, that it's like anything, when we put something out, you know, when they said, you know, Williams and Works were like, we really hope we can get 150 and 200 would be great, and, you know, to get over that 200 number. So I think the amount of people that took the time, it's not like, it wasn't long, but it also wasn't, you know, a 5-question survey. So I think that the response rate, we were very happy and excited about. And I also think the number of people who said, and this builds on some comments that were just made and that we've heard as well, is that people are going outside of the township to meet recreation needs, and people are okay with that. That's not a bad thing. But we're hearing a number of people saying, we want activities within the township, and, you know, and Ryan, we're in the same boat as you as far as kid age. You know, our Wiswasser was amazing when our kids were young, and now they're 12 and 15, and all of their friends are 12 and 15, and it's like, we love having them over for bonfires, and we'll have that all the time, but they're also looking for things, so, and that's clearly a growing age group. And I think as we continue to see housing developments in the area and younger families moving in, that, you know, we're gonna have that, you know, those younger kids becoming those tweens and teens that are looking for recreational activities to do in the township. And it'd be great if we could start moving, which we are moving towards those things, so that, you know, in the future we have those, in the way that you said, Ryan, of, you know, not becoming a different township, but becoming another or a better version of the township we already are.
Okay, did you, as wearing your museum hat, which I think is an asset to have you on the board with that, did you see anything in here that might go against the plans that you all are making for Cousins Park?
No, it was, I think, only referenced in there, just in the one spot for the James Cousins
Yeah.
Park specifically, what the plan is for that, and it was basically just work with the museum committee
Good, okay.
to align with our project going forward. I know, the farmer's market also uses that space, and, I think as the museum goes forward with our planning, there's every intention to consult with, the farmer's market board to make sure that it's a space that meets everybody's needs the way that they want them met. So,
That's good.
there wasn't anything that I saw as contradictory to what our plans are at all.
I'd hate to have two
Right.
diverging plans.
No, I think that, I think we're all on the same page there.
Yeah, and we've been able to have informal conversations at
Yeah,
the market
yeah.
and those types of things, so.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions from the board before we open the public hearing? All right, then I'd ask for a motion to open the public hearing.
I move to open the public hearing.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll support it.
Thank you. Let's take a voice vote on that. All those in favor of opening the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That was an aye on that too, sorry. All right, we'll have a public hearing. I know we don't have a lot of public here, but those who are here are welcome to come to the lectern and share your thoughts, ask questions, time for some open dialogue.
I just have something that came up in regards to recreation. And
Ray Kotke, Park Lake Road. In regards to recreation possibilities and the children that are getting older, when I grew up in Lansing, the fire department used to flood all the baseball diamonds, and they would have ice skating rinks and actual hockey rinks there. You can still see them today. I don't think they use them for them, but they have what we call hot houses where you can warm up. And they would sell hot chocolate and things of that nature. I think the back, I'm trying to think of the direction. The northeast quadrant of Wiswasser Park is large enough to do that with. And it appears to be flat enough. I've looked at it before with this possibility, but it wouldn't cost us a whole lot for the fire department to flood that. They may even be able to pump the water out of the lake, to not have to use their other stuff. But one of the problems we have, somebody will argue, well, we have a lake that people ice skate on, and that's true, but lately, we haven't had a whole lot of ice. And I swear in the last decade, I live on the lake, and, today, there's no ice on the lake, and we're in January. So, in that realm of thought, if you flooded this area, you only have maybe 4 inches of ice, 5 inches of ice. But when it gets warm, you can still skate there, because, there's water on the ice, but there's not water underneath that you'll get drowned in. So, I think we should look at that as a possibility. That would be a relatively inexpensive way to make use of that in, as you say, the off time for Wiswasser Park. And it's pretty large. I think it would make a great hockey arena, because we're not gonna have, hundreds of people skating out there. And that's pretty much it. I mentioned 2 errors. Did you bring
I
those?
did share those with staff, and they said that they would get that updated.
And then I'm pretty excited about Mr. Montry and his staff getting this plan to the DNR so that we can file for the trust fund grant. There, I said it. So that's pretty much it. But yeah, I think that we should look at that for an ice rink. Thanks.
Thanks, Ray. Are there other folks that want to say anything on the record during the public hearing? All right, hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
I'll support.
All right, a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Let's take a voice vote on that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, our public hearing is now closed. The other thing, Adam, that I hear from folks is pickleball. Pickleball, pickleball, pickleball.
Yeah. We'll have it at Granger, right? All the courts that are opening there, so are either already open or are open. So there's 8 or 12.
Where's that?
At the Granger Meadows.
Oh, over on the
Yeah.
Wood and Wood Stadium.
Yeah, so I've got a old man soccer league in 35 minutes, and I'll see, the director of Parks and Rec for DeWitt is on our team, so I'll ask him what the status of that is, tonight and find out, but, yeah, that's, and they're happy that it's in a facility where people can't complain about the ding, 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 right, and no neighbor noise complaints at that facility, so, but yeah, I'll find out I'll ask him tonight what the status of it is, so.
That'd be great. The other piece of feedback that I have heard over the years is that the county is not invested in the township in terms of parks as much as they could, so where there's opportunity for us to join together, I think would be a great idea. Bring some of that money that we send to the county back down to the township. That's the feedback that I had heard from folks. Any other last feedback you all have before we move on to the resolution?
I will just say that I'm really excited about the process, or the probability or possibility, I guess, of connecting to the East Lansing Trail network. I think that would be huge for our community. Just the thought that I could get on my bicycle and safely get anywhere to East Lansing or even Holt if I wanted, by that network of trails, that Bath would be connected to that, I think would be a real game changer for us recreationally.
Yeah, I've heard north as well, connecting in Langsberg to what
Yeah.
exists up there.
Yep,
Yeah.
I think that would
that's-
be, I was really excited to see that as a top priority.
Very smart. Anything else before we move on to the resolution? All right, so we do have a resolution, number 2024-01, right, because this is our first one. Asking us to formally adopt the 2024-2028 five-year Parks and Recreation Plan. That will also allow our staff to then send this to the state, which needs to be on file in order for us to be eligible for grants. And it sort of operationalizes it here within the township staff. Are there any questions or thoughts before we take action? Great, I think this allows for the staff still to make typographical changes, not content changes once we approve it, but as Ray pointed out, there's just a small mistake in there that'll get fixed. It's nice that we have the document that we can make those edits as we need. All right, then I would ask for a motion to approve the resolution, or not, depending on how you all are feeling.
I'll make a motion to adopt the planning commission, or sorry, the Parks and Recreation, five-year recreation plan.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All right, let's do a roll call vote on this one.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Ms. Hagerman?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, that passes. Miles, do you think you could get a copy of this to each of the planning commissioners as well?
Yep, definitely.
I think that'll help as we think about planning and the capital improvement plan.
Definitely.
It's nice to have a nice color printed copy for folks. And if you're interested in that document, it is available online. You can also come to the township and get a copy if folks are looking for what that plan looks like. All right, that takes us down to the introduction and first reading of zoning ordinance 31.85. That's a health and wellness center ordinance. I'm gonna turn it over to Miles again to introduce that.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate, what I said at the last meeting, which is, we worked with legal counsel on this one. There became the necessity, to review this ordinance. It was currently in the form of a massage parlor ordinance. In an effort to move with the times, we changed up some of the language and commonly referred to as health and wellness centers now. We also changed up a couple of the definitions around office and office space, because this land use is typically associated in retail centers, which accompany offices, so we had to better define what that meant as well. There were some problems with the old ordinance and what was actually legally enforceable and what we had the power to regulate. So, did away with most of the problematic language, which was most of the language, and installed a much shorter, but enforceable set of standards.
What was the vote at the planning commission to move this forward?
It was unanimous.
Thank you. Questions for Miles on this ordinance? If approved today, it'll come back to us at our next meeting for the second reading and final approval, and then we'll go into effect within 30 days, is that how that works?
Yes, I
Yeah.
have one question.
Good.
I mean, do you see any negative impact from this ordinance?
No, this moves us
Okay.
into, this is a slam dunk, I think, and as far as ordinances go.
It's a big score for us.
The other ordinance was over 20 pages long, and it was too detailed.
Very detailed.
Very detailed. Any other questions or thoughts? If not, I'd take a motion to approve introduction and first reading.
I'll make a motion to approve the introduction and first reading of zoning ordinance number 31.85, health and wellness as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion before we move to a vote?
Mr. Supervisor? I
Yes.
would just like to clarify one thing about the effective date. When and if it is adopted at your next meeting, it's a 7-day publication period, and then members of your community would have a right, if they, as citizens, to file a petition for referendum. Absent that, in that 7-day window, it would be effective.
Not 30, it's 7 days. Thank you for that. Any last comments or questions, discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote on here too.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Ms. Hagerman?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, so that moves past its first reading. Will come back to us again in 2 weeks. That brings us to the introduction and first reading of a second zoning ordinance, 31.86, private drives, and roads. And I'll turn it over to the planner again.
Yeah, so this one is much more complicated than the previous ordinance we just talked about, and would have a much larger effect on the township, I believe. Like most ordinances, it's always hard to know the externalities that these ordinances are gonna create and what possible scenarios could come up. I do think this is gonna be one of those types of regulations where we'll have to see how the market responds to this regulation, and if some kind of crazy negative externality or some unforeseen event occurs, we can always put a moratorium and bring this back and review. This is an ordinance that we worked with the Drain Commission, the Road Commission, the Township Engineer, and our other partnering agencies to develop this, including legal counsel. It's quite detailed in nature, but to try to quickly sum it up, it essentially creates 3 categories: private drives, and then small private roads and large private roads. The private drives would serve 1 or 2 households. The small private road would serve 3 to 6 households, and a large private road would serve 7 to 12. As you go up in those categories, additional standards are levied. The intent of it is to give the ability to lower barriers to entry for developers looking to develop a smaller number of units of housing. So if a developer is building 50+ homes, at that scale, they would have the means and the fiscal, it would make fiscal sense to develop a public road network, and then to the standards, and then eventually be adopted by the Clayton County Road Commission. If you're trying to put 4 homes on a larger parcel, depending on how deep those homes are into the parcel, it might not make fiscal sense to develop a public road to public road standards with curb and ditching. So it's just giving the avenue for some of those small to medium developers to be able to create units of housing in the township. There's also some odd parcels or some landlocked parcels that are currently large enough for a home to be placed on them, but because of the failure of access to any road network or road right-of-way, no home can be placed on them. This would create an avenue for a parcel that might be landlocked to be able to one day eventually be developed.
Questions? Go ahead, Kate.
Currently, does that avenue, so to speak, not exist?
It doesn't, it wouldn't make, in my approximation, and, you know, you could always, of course, have a very rich individual that's very dead set on that landlocked parcel. They think it's quite ideal to develop, you know, some larger house and have infinite funds and be able to bring in a public road and gain the right of way. Or work with the property owner in front of them and buy up enough land, if it exists, to get road right away on the established road. But for most homeowners, most developers or potential home builders, nothing can go there. It's a dead parcel.
Other questions? Miles, what was the vote at the planning commission on this one?
I believe this one, and John, correct me if you're asking me about votes before the break there, so, you know, we did have a split vote on this one, I believe. Yeah. The majority, obviously, because it came to you guys, voted in favor, but I believe there were 1 or 2 dissenting votes.
There was one person absent, if I remember right, and there was one person that objected. 5 is more.
Yep, thank you.
I was the one person who was absent.
If I could just-
That's why I asked the question.
One of the
Go ahead,
concerns
John.
that we had was, we didn't really want to create urban sprawl, if I can use that term generally. And that was one of the reasons that we had quite a few restrictions on how many parcels you could actually develop using this technique. You also notice that we don't have any way for the roads to be interconnected, so you couldn't have a road, 2 roads with, say, 10 houses on each one that were connected at some point, because we really don't want to create a path through traffic. I think this is more designed for, and then the fellow that really got this going, which he filed zoning ordinance.
Text
Text
amendment.
amendment.
Was he wanted to develop some like farmettes that were like 2 to 5 acres on a parcel. Does that help anybody make a decision on this?
Thank you.
Thank you.
John,
Yeah?
I do have a question. The Aldridge Farm, you've got 2 roads going back. Was this the start of this? And there's nothing going behind?
Well, the person that filed this was Darrell Kessler, quite honestly, and he's interested, I don't know the property, he owns with somebody else most of this property that he's interested in creating this situation on.
Right.
South of the soccer fields.
Yeah.
Down by the soccer
Yeah.
field,
I just noticed that when you mentioned that no drive-through going from one road to the other, and that's what this on Aldridge Farm did. They both go all the way to the back and stop.
Right, correct, they're dead-ended.
Yep.
Yeah.
They
Yeah, we
did.
don't wanna create a through path, public transport for
Right.
transit.
Thanks,
Any other
John.
questions? Thank you.
So I was on the board when we first banned private roads. I also live on a private road. I think that ban was a good idea. I share the concern about housing, as I mentioned earlier, and I hear everything that Miles is saying, and he's not wrong on any of that. I don't know that what we've tried to do in here solves some of the problems that we see on our private roads around the township. It's a like nonstop ruckus between neighbors, especially once you move away from the original owners and people have bought into the ownership of the road and don't understand they have, and if you're not budgeting for it, suddenly it's tens of thousands of dollars and neighbor against neighbor and people calling the township and saying, you know, why isn't this happening on my road and my neighbor this and my neighbor that. So I'll be a no tonight on this. With that, would someone like to put it into a motion form?
I just want, the county does not accept private driveways very easy.
Not at all.
And you have to bring them up to code, you have to have them blacktop, you have to have them curb and gutter, and it would be really hard for these people to have the county take them over.
Oh, absolutely, yes. The county standard is curb and gutter and asphalt, 22 feet wide, I think, if I remember right, minimum. And that's the only thing they will accept.
Yep.
There are some areas that are allowing what is referred to as low-impact development, which is a gravel road with ditches on the sides. But we do have a couple of them in the township right now that
Yep.
have worked well, and then we've got some that didn't work at all, which is why we banned them for about 10 or 15 years.
Can I,
Whether this will work out, I don't really know, but we were forced to when Mr. Kessler asked us for a zoning amendment.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Al. Go ahead, Miles.
yeah, I was just gonna speak to a couple of those points that were brought up. So Al, to your point, one of the standards within this ordinance points out that if any developer or property owner is to establish one of these 3 private road or drive types, they're agreeing by their approval from the planning commission, once they get permit to establish it, that they will not seek it ever to be adopted as a public road. So we're trying to make that well-known upfront early on in the process, cause to your point, it's almost impossible for them to, and we don't want them to feel like they were worked over in any way for, so, we always thought that it would get adopted and you weren't upfront with us. So to your point, we're trying to be upfront about that. And then, to the supervisor's concerns, I 100% am not here to sway anyone either way. I can see both sides of the argument with these. To what John said, we do have some that work well in the township, private roads. We have private roads that cause us constant headache, me in particular, I get a lot of phone calls about these. What we attempted to do with this ordinance is before, private drives had almost no regulation in the township around them, it was just kind of on a case-by-case basis, and there was no real guiding set of standards, so it was really anything goes. And then the reverse of that was, okay, we're done with these, no more of this at all, ever. And so we tried to create a middle path here where we had said, okay, well, some of these, sometimes, if you meet some of these standards which we've laid out, and then the problem is self-governing. People have trouble self-governing. So we have tried to create agreements, access agreements and maintenance agreements that have to be submitted with one of these applications and have to live with the land to give the owners and operators and property owners served by their private roads some ability to hopefully self-govern. We're trying to give them the tools in their toolbox to do that. However, I wanna be as upfront as possible that we are not going to govern these. We are giving, if this was to come to market, we'd be out of it.
Thinking of the Mead Creek example, does that fit this ordinance, that development? That's too big, right? I mean, this only is up to, a large private road is only up to 12 parcels. Not that that issue couldn't happen with 6 to 12 parcels,
Yeah.
but I do think that I feel like maybe not exactly an apples to apples comparison, because just the number of homeowners in there leads to more potential for chaos.
For sure, yeah.
Then-
And it's at the age now where most of those folks were not there originally
Yeah.
to know any of this stuff was set up.
Right, so I guess as a side question, for a developer who wanted to make a Mead Creek type development, that's gonna require
Public road.
public road
Yeah,
going
100%.
forward.
Yep. And Mead
Okay.
Creek also has, particularly, not, and I hope no one at Mead Creek listening is offended, but I think they would probably tell you their HOA isn't operated the best.
We have a management company now,
Oh, great, that's great. That's actually great to hear.
because we, the owners, have agreed. It's hard to find people who wanna be elected officials
Yeah.
at the homeowners association and tell you your garbage can can't be out.
Yeah, I mean, at that scale, it's hard because
Yeah.
you're against your neighbors.
Yeah. With the, perchance, at our last meeting, you mentioned the development, I always forget what it's called, behind, McDonald's and
Yeah.
MSU, what's the,
No, it's not Bonnie Meadows, it's one of the meadows. We have too many things with the word meadow.
yeah, I think it's
in
the
it.
Meadows.
It's made the Meadows, correct.
So there's a plot of land there that is still free for them to build on,
Yep.
and
Yep.
they would that be a public
It
road?
would be
or-
a public road.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is the rest of that a public road?
it is.
Some of
Okay.
it's private,
Some of it might, yeah, some of it could still be private, but that just might be an issue.
yeah,
where the
because they're
developer
having
hasn't
trouble
had it
keeping the
adopted.
speed down, and our police won't, go on the private road to keep the speed down.
Right, okay.
But that might just be another one of those issues like with Food Court Lane where just the paperwork needs to be filed with the road commission.
Okay. Other questions, thoughts, go ahead, Al.
Just a statement, it only takes 2 people on one road to have a problem. And I mean, you don't have to have 12, just 2 people that can't get along. So I'm up in the air about this one, but I do know that there's areas where they do need a driveway to go in for two people, two different groups.
Yep.
Can I make a comment before you call? Go ahead, Kate, you go.
I was just saying, to sort of follow up with that, I feel that I am generally a proponent for a middle-of-the-road type solution. And the idea that there's some people can ruin it for everybody else is also frustrating as well, but as a high school teacher, I totally get that. But yeah, I think I tend to support something that is seen as meant to provide opportunities for people who may take them.
Yeah, thanks.
It's probably important to note though, real quick too, before the conversation goes, that any of these private roads or drives would have to be reviewed by the planning commission. It's not like by, any type of vote tonight. It's just like, you're free to do it now. It still has to be reviewed
As part of the process.
as part of the process.
And you'll make sure that those pieces are in place that the ordinance now calls to be in place? The
Yes.
agreements and things like that.
Sorry to butt in.
No, it's okay, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, I'd just like to make some pre-vote comments and that, when I first read this, and I'd be honest, I wasn't a very big fan. But hearing some of the discussion and the explanations by Planner Robler and hearing some other input from Planning Commission, I think I'm prepared to move forward with this positively, so.
Might you make that a motion?
I certainly will make a motion to approve the introduction and first reading of zoning ordinance 31.86, private drives and roads.
Thank you, we have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second, some great conversation, but is there any other discussion before we move to a roll call vote? Madam Clerk?
Mr. Funes Bliss?
No.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes?
Ms. Hagerman?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes.
All right, motion passes. Again, this will come back in 2 weeks to us for the second reading and then passage. All right, so that takes us to the end of unfinished business. We're now in number 14, new business. Items for introduction and discussion, there are none. Items for action, the tax payment on the downtown development property. Neither Superintendent Hildebrand or Treasurer Wilson could be here today, so I am prepared to introduce this. For those on the board, we've done this a couple of times those on the board who have been here for a while, we've done this a couple of times. For our new board members, when we dissolved the DDA several, 18, 24 months ago, the property that the DDA owned came to the township. The township is now working with our law firm to bring that into the township in the way that all the other property the township owns is in the township. We haven't done that yet, and so there's a tax bill due twice a year on this property. And our previous treasurer wanted full transparency about how we were using the leftover DDA funds and wanted to make sure the public and the board collectively knew, and we as the board took action to say we would spend DDA funds on the taxes for the DDA property. Ultimately, we're voting to take money from one of our accounts and move it to another account because we're paying ourselves and the other taxing authorities. Again, once this is worked out with our legal counsel, we should not have to continue to move money around like this. But our new treasurer, in the spirit of, again, transparency, is asking us to do the same thing. So what you have in your packet is the winter tax bill for the piece of property down on Main Street that the DDA formerly owned that is now the township's. And the proposal is to use DDA funds, DDA fund balance funds, to pay the $444.82.
Is that the property along the railroad tracks? It used to be?
I'm always awful about where it actually is, Al, I'm sorry.
I believe you're right.
That does sound right.
It's just a vacant lot, there's nothing there, is that the one?
Well, used to be a railroad goes through there.
Right.
And we were worried at the time that they accepted it, they sprayed vicious chemicals on them railroad tracks to keep them from weeds growing. And, I just was wondering if that was the one.
I believe that is, but let me wait for Miles to
Yeah, I'm trying to-
gut check that. Other questions while we look that up? Okay,
What's the timeline on that process? Is this the last time that we would have to do this, or is it gonna happen again in the fall? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know. Do you know? I think we're working with someone, not you.
Yes, that's true, but I am aware of this project. I would expect that we should be concluded by then, but I can't make that promise. I will, though, commit to checking on that and report back to the board next time.
So if the DDA were still in existence, the DDA money would automatically have been paying this bill?
Yeah, so they would still collect the tax increment financing and pay it out of that. What we have is the leftover tax increment financing.
Yeah, it's the property just south of where the railroads were, it's the property next to where the railroad went over.
Yeah.
So, some of those issues could persist on that property.
For sure. Other questions? Again, the treasurer has it within her authority to do this, but is asking for our support so that we know where the money that is left over from the DDA is going and the public knows that that's how it's being used as well.
Just as a thought experiment, what if we don't pay the taxes on it? Goes back to the township or does it go to the county?
And then we have to like collect against ourselves. It would end up going to the county and,
Okay,
you know.
The county would pay you for what you had not paid you, and then you would have to go after you to get that reimbursed and then repay the county.
Yeah, it'd be a vicious conversation between ourselves.
Yes, yes.
I wasn't really being serious.
No, it does seem perfunctory, but I appreciate that the treasurer, both current and past, wanted to be open and honest with the money from the DDA. Someone want to put a motion forward?
I'll make a motion to authorize the expenditure from the Bath Township DDA fund for payment of the 2023 winter property tax for $444.82 for the vacant parcel on Main Street. And then do you want me to read the parcel number? I'll just include it.
If you could include it in the
Yep.
I'll second that.
minutes. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion or questions about this action? Since we're moving money around from a fund balance, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Mr. Phillips?
I'm sorry, me?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Ms. Hagerman?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes,
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Anything else on anybody's mind before we move forward to closing up the meeting? All right, great. So we don't have a superintendent's report as we don't have a superintendent here today. There is this public statement 2 time. This is 3 minutes to, again, say anything about anything you want to say at the lectern. And the clerk will let you know when your time's up.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank the board for giving us feedback at the planning commission, because we really don't like to spend hours of time on something that the board isn't going to support when it gets to the board level. I appreciate that very much. It expedites our work very greatly. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
thank you, John.
Have we started yet?
Nope.
Ray Kotke, Park Lake Road. I don't have a packet, so I don't remember what your consensus was on this specific topic for the planning commission, but it was the solar and wind farm. It was concerning the House Bill 5120 and 5121, about the state taking over that. And I personally wanted to know at what point in size do they take over? And it's over 100 megawatts for a wind turbine. And that, each wind turbine takes 2 to 40 acres, depending on the level of the land. And our land around here is just flat as a pancake, so that would take the most. So you're looking at about 4,000 acre wind farm project. Anything under that, I think we should have some oversight as a township, because that's the point in time, over 400, over 100 megawatts is when they kick in the state statute. And in regards to solar, that's over 50 megawatts for a solar farm. That's, by my calculations, it says it takes 200 soccer fields. This is literally what they said on the website. About 100,000 solar panels, and those are 550 watt solar panels. But 100,000 of them is what it would take for a minimum 50 megawatt solar farm. So anything under that, you're looking at, say 4,000 acres for the wind farm, and 375 to 400 acres for the solar farm. So anything under those two parameters, I think we should, as a township, should definitely look at some oversight on that. So that's pretty much what I have to say.
Thank you. Since that is the totality of our public, I think that's the totality of our public statements tonight. Thank you to both gentlemen for giving us some of those thoughts. That brings us to board member comments. Kate, I think I started with you last time, so I'm gonna go on my right side to Jack first.
I have nothing, thank you.
I'll say get well soon to those who are ill in the township, and looking forward when everyone is able to return safely.
I don't have anything.
Yeah, okay.
I received my absentee ballot application in the mail today, so I would encourage everybody to register to vote if you have not, or fill out your ballot forms, if that's the way you plan to go. It's a good thing to do.
The earlier you do it, the better
Yes.
for our friend,
Get it
the
checked off
clerk
the
here.
list.
Don't wait till the last minute. Great comments. Thanks all. With that, we are ready to be adjourned.
I move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, a voice vote, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned. Thanks for coming out tonight.
I wanted to say something about.
Thanks for all the feedback. Sorry about the
Some woman,
37 day mix up
community
there.
page on Facebook, she said, why do I have to say in public what part